Hey guys, welcome back to the Ground Up Show. Today, this is one of the most fun episodes that I've had in a while. I had my two Aussie friends on, Josh and Tommy, from an amazing podcast called The Daily Talk Show. It's high energy, very fun, very funny, at times completely offensive, but what would you expect from a couple of Australians? I think you guys are really going to enjoy this one. Not only was it a good time, but we also have some pretty great advice for creatives and people looking to break through the noise. On the podcast, we talk about the Imposter Syndrome, landing big opportunities over email, and how to reframe any environment to remove the pressure. If you've gotten some value out of the Ground Up Show, I'd love it if you'd consider contributing on Patreon. Not only will you help to keep this podcast ad-free, but you will also get some pretty cool videos in exchange. If you sign up at patreon.com/Matt Diavella, you'll see I create videos every single month on lifestyle design, business, filmmaking, how to grow an audience, and much, much more. Again, that's patreon.com/Matt Diavella. All right, let's get into this week's episode. This is Josh and Tommy. All right, just a couple ground rules. Obviously, I recently changed over the podcast, so there's going to be no cursing.
Okay.
So, yeah. It's
And
actually
then you've
also...
got
it's
us on after that.
Yeah, it's actually a deeply religious podcast as well.
Yeah,
So
right,
if everybody wants to share their thoughts about religion before we start,
Yeah, great.
that would be good.
Perfect.
Yeah.
We've covered it.
Cool, guys. Well, thanks for coming on the podcast. Excited to chat with you. So why don't you guys give a intro about how you guys work together now, because obviously there's a lot to talk about how you guys got to work together, podcast together, and create videos together. But what is the kind of work you do these days?
Yeah, well, we both had production companies doing very similar things, and it's nice when actually it's good and bad when your mate is your competitor, but it's also your mate. And so we were running our production companies alongside each other, using each other as a resource and almost like a sounding board for the struggles that each business has and goes through. And so it got to a point where we started our podcast, and that came out of us just having these conversations every single day about business and working out that, hey, we actually have a lot in common. We talk about a bunch of stuff. We're going through the same struggles, which then flowed into us going, well, maybe we should just merge our businesses together and do it as one.
Yeah, I think it's the natural collaboration that we were doing it, where at the beginning, when you're just starting a business, I think that it's you can fall into, but there's all these traps, I think, that happens with business. And I think one of them is that competitors are even a thing. I think that within the world of video production, there is so much work going around. And so then it starts to become about identifying what you do really well and then what others do really well. And so I think that Tommy and I were able to decide, Tommy is very good at this first person type of content, actually being able to have a scene and just make something out of it that injects him into it. Whereas I've come from sort of a more traditional background of using an easy rig and over-engineering things. And so that works really well in the context of having clients, because sometimes they want that, but other times they want something different. So the podcast, the Daily Talk Show, is every single weekday, and it's us just talking shit. Can we say shit? Have I already?
You can say shit. Yeah.
Right.
That was a bit in the beginning. That's what we call it in the business. I don't know if you guys do bits on your podcast.
Oh, you can't. We are allowed to swear. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
So literally, the thing about Australians and Americans, it can fall short when you're delivering a joke in a different country. I totally thought that you were being serious about not swearing.
You can blame me on the delivery.
Is it because we say the C word on our podcast, or we don't say it anymore?
We've retired it.
So obviously my fiance is Australian. Yeah. On the first date, a fan of Jim Jeffries, and knew a little bit about Australian culture, and I was like, obviously you guys say.
Yeah, drop the C-bomb.
I dropped it.
Cat.
Yeah. cunt. I just lost like 300 viewers. So I said it, and then she said, "Oh, I don't really like that word, actually." And then I was like, "Oh, okay. This is an awkward start to our first date." But yeah, so she
wasn't joking.
She wasn't joking.
Okay.
Yeah, she wasn't joking. She doesn't like use the word often. And that was eye-opening for me for sure. But it's definitely, is it starting to go away?
No, I think that probably, I think it's a way of showing people how close you are. So
that sounds really weird.
Yeah, so I think it starts off where you start swearing. Like the progression of friendship is you start swearing around them, and then you eventually get to a point that you're calling them a fuckhead, and that's like the full progression of a relationship.
Right? Yeah. It's it forms more of a bond.
Yeah,
I think that's the best kind of friendship, when you can shit on each other and not be easily offended.
Like we had Seth Godin on our podcast.
Oh, that's a nice drop.
And
that's good. Just casual,
just very casual. I can say though, didn't call him a fuckhead once. Didn't feel like our relationship was even like. It's funny. It was the first we've done. Over 190 episodes of the podcast, every single one explicit. And I went to upload the Seth Godin one. I turned to Tommy. I'm like, "Fuck, we didn't swear in the Seth Godin episode." I was like, "Should I put it as explicit?" Like, because I just see all the little red E's next to all of our episodes.
We should have gone with explicit, because people would have been like, Seth Godin's saying the C.
Yeah.
Seth Godin gets real dirty.
Uncensored. It should have been the name, Seth Godin Uncensored. No, I think, I actually do the same thing in terms of making it censored or uncensored. But actually, lately I've just done everything censored. Explicit. Yeah, everything, there's curse words in everyone, just because it's easier then. It makes a decision for me.
Full cowboy.
Yeah. But, so there is cursing on this podcast.
Okay,
good.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's good.
Do you actually feel...
We should redo the opener, because you guys probably would do an entirely
I'm just
different...
thinking about what my face would have looked like as you said that. I was like...
I think we're really serious. Like, I think like, okay, yeah, this is...
a challenge.
This is I started thinking like, okay, what am I going to say? Like, I'd replaced ums with fuck, so it become really easy. I'm like, am I just going to start saying a lot?
What if that was like something that people taught in terms of like public speaking, where just you... Because I feel like that's probably better than an or an or you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Tony Robbins has started swearing more. He went through a time where he didn't swear, and now he goes full hog.
Yeah.
And so it has cut through. And
I think it's because maybe like older forms of media had to be censored, because he started out doing telecommercials or whatever they are. You know what I mean? Like late night television spots.
Well, he does have fuck you money, so
that helps.
Yeah.
It definitely helps. So you guys do a podcast every single weekday, 190 episodes.
Yeah.
It's kind of crazy. Has it been challenging to keep up that pace?
Oh yeah. It's funny because it's like the most rewarding thing, but has been the most challenging thing, but it's been hard, but it hasn't felt as hard as what I thought it would be. Yeah. We've found a momentum, a bit of a rhythm with it. And so it's weird. It's like I've never committed to a creative endeavor more than this. And I wouldn't have, and I think because all the creative endeavors have been solo. So when you have that person there, like you doing, nearly 100 shows now, it's like, hats off to you.
Doing it on your own. Yeah, doing it on your own. At the beginning, I always thought that doing it on your own was easier. Because it's like you don't have to worry about anyone else. You just have to rely on yourself. But then through doing the 190 plus episodes, there was half of those I was traveling. And so Tommy and I weren't even in the same room. And so when you're dealing with time zones, there'd be days where I was in a shit mood because I'm like, I hadn't slept in a while or whatever it is. And then other days Tommy would be, and we can balance each other out. And even I think that if we both rock up in shit moods, one is worse than the other, and the other one can realize that in this moment, I need to like just calm down. And so like, I think that that's the big thing about what we do is it's like, maybe within duos, there can be this sense that you're perfect or like we've found this unique thing, but sometimes we like piss each other off. And that is part of the actual process. And that is, if you're waiting to find a business partner or a collaborator that doesn't piss you off, I think you're going to be doing a solo operation.
Yeah. And one thing's for certain though, coming out the other side is you feel better. It's like it's a release. It's if like aside from what it might do for us and our brands and our business, it's like it's actually cathartic getting stuff out of your head and vocalizing with a mate.
Yeah, I think that's the thing that I found too, because early on it's the paradox of when you're releasing a podcast, videos, whatever it is, nobody's watching.
Yeah.
You have to be consistent if you want to eventually become successful, but it doesn't feel like there's a point to be successful because in the beginning, nobody's listening. So you're like, oh man, I'm really busy this week. I got a lot going on. I got to visit my family. I'm going to be traveling. Is it worth it to put out that podcast on Monday, or should I just skip it and then go the next week? And if you do that, and if you get into a habit of it early on, you're never going to get to the point where people will listen to it. So I think that's the hardest part, is like you need to actually find things that are in it besides the success or besides getting a bunch of people to listen to it or getting that feedback. It's, like you said, it's something where you guys almost get therapy from being able to have these conversations. But then even for me, it's like being able to connect with people that I would have met before and being able to talk about creativity.
You wouldn't do it though. Like I think about when people offer up advice, about getting into making videos or getting into doing a podcast, and people even saying, "Oh, I want to make videos." It's like, I know for me, I've had this like burning passion inside me of actually creating, and the process is what stimulates me. If the person doesn't have that, they're not going to make it through learning what Final Cut is or Premiere Pro, and like all those hours that it takes to actually get any good, to be able to export a thing that actually fits onto YouTube.
Yeah.
It's like,
I think that's a good point. Like, it's not for everybody.
Yeah.
Not like podcasting, creating original content. It's not for everyone. You have to be self-motivated in order for it to work.
We heard from a guy the other day who said, "Yeah, I've got to create a podcast," and he wasn't really that into it. It was like, it has to be done, and it's like from day one, if it's not coming from this desire for you to do it, I think that it's going to be an uphill battle. If you're doing it because it's a trend and it feels like it needs to be done, I think it's a lot harder. When I was working at a company called Envato, which is like a marketplace, they always would talk about, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And I think that's like what it's all about with what Tommy and I have done, in the sense of, you think about, like, I could have done 10 episodes really quickly because I wouldn't have had to run anything past anyone else. But actually the consistency of doing it every single day, I think, it takes another person.
It's funny that you mentioned that quote, because it brings back a memory for me. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. It's actually an African proverb.
Yeah.
And I
didn't want to mention that. I feel like
between the two of us.
Yeah, well, the thing is, I didn't want to mention there was an African proverb because I felt like it was getting into like wanky territory. Like if I was like, I wanted to generalize in the sense of not going too hard.
It's wisdom that makes sense.
Yeah.
But if you add the African proverb part, it kind of ruins and takes the steam out of it. And that's exactly what I did. So this was, right before I was even starting any of this original content stuff. We had the premiere of Minimalism in New York City, in Manhattan. And it was just a wild experience, period. Just because, first of all, I was just like really nervous. I wasn't sure if anybody was going to show up, and to be a line around the block, sold out, maybe 600 seats. And then we did a podcast afterwards. I was on Josh and Ryan's from The Minimalists, their podcast, live on stage in front of this whole group of people. And then I just had never answered questions before. I had never really done that. Like all my thinking on these topics have been inside my own head and reading quotes and inspirational quotes and shit. And then somebody asked me like, "Oh, how were you able to do it?" And then I said that quote, and then after I said it, I was like, I should probably add that this is an African proverb. So I was like, "Oh yeah, that's an African proverb." And then just a ripple of laughter in the back row of my family and friends being like, "This guy's a fucking asshole." Like, Matt's never been to Africa. How is he getting off mentioning these African proverbs? And it's something that they never let go.
Yeah. I think the other funny thing too is when someone's asking you a question or you're talking with in an interview context, I tend to try and read people a lot. And I think that when you're trying to read, as I'm even saying the quote, you can pick up these little moments of like, oh, they're thinking something in this moment. So I think that's another part of this whole process, which is like you start to realize the internal voice in your head and when you're picking up on little cues, and you almost have to, there gets to a point where you have to let go of a lot of that sort of stuff.
Well, it's better than saying that you came up with it.
Yeah. I mean, that's actually, though, there are those cues throughout, because sometimes you'll get this thing where you're like, somebody said that. And like maybe it comes in the form of like, I don't know who said this, but, and I think that's kind of important, or giving credit to people when it's
or they
deserved.
tweeted or whatever, and then before you know it, you're like saying that they said it.
In terms of the client work and you guys doing freelance stuff, how did you get your first clients? How did you get into filmmaking first?
I think my career has been a lot shorter than what Josh's has been. He's been doing it since he was about 3.
Yeah, what the heck, dude? Like 14 years old. I left middle school and started freelance filmmaking.
What's great is actually meeting someone who found what they wanted to do and are still doing that thing 10, 15 years later.
Yeah.
It's impressive.
It's pretty, it is. It feels a bit outrageous in the sense of you always feel like you're young. Yeah, I think it was Katy Perry that said this.
Good to credit her first.
It's good. Well done.
It's not an African proverb.
It's not an African proverb. But maybe she got it from Africa.
Maybe.
But,
this show's just going downhill in terms of our references. Next is Dr. Seuss.
No, you should actually just speak directly with Katy on this. But no, I think there was something around like she talked about becoming famous. And as soon as when she became famous, she sort of got stuck in the time in which she found the fame. So when she was like, in her 20s, she never felt like she changed that. I think it maybe could be...
Are you still 14?
No, well, I feel like from a career point of view, when you find your career, there's actually all of this baggage that never leaves you. So you almost feel like you're still 14 editing a project, which is... It's like a golf swing. To use a golf analogy, I know you love them on the show.
Yeah. Of course, everybody knows that.
It's like if you start young and you like build out a golf swing, it's very hard to like change and adapt when you're down the road. But so I started young and but had a lot like pulled from a lot of influences. I think things like community management, like the whole social media stuff started happening. While like when I started, it was like delivering everything on DVDs. Like I had to worry about like DVD authoring and making sure like menus worked and things like that.
Oh god!
And so when it comes from that place, I think the other thing too that can happen is you become quite skeptical of certain trends because you've seen things happen. You feel like you've been through a lot of stuff. So it's the first client for me would have been. A community TV show where I got paid per minute that went on the screen. So I got paid $23 per minute. And I remember it got me into this really bad habit of like editing really long interviews.
It's like the worst incentive for an editor
literally.
ever.
I'm like, hey guys, like I've done the whole episode, like, the 25 minutes or whatever it was. And it was just like a multicam edit. I remember one weekend I was like, my brother convinced me I needed an Xbox 360. It just had come out. And so I managed to edit enough long-form content to buy myself the Xbox.
Josh skipped the washing the car for pocket money for editing long-form interviews.
Yeah. And so, that's where like I started, and then it went into working in radio, doing digital content there, working at Invato, the tech company, which was, creating content, celebrating creatives. And Tommy went down a completely different road to start with.
Mine was a bit more cowboy. I started out creating content for myself, YouTube channel, which is very different to client work because, you can spend as many hours as you want on your own project. And if it stuffs up, it's on you. It doesn't really matter. So you have that safety net. And for me, like my first client, I was sitting in a cafe doing just writing. I didn't have a job and I was like going a bit crazy, just writing out stuff.
It's like morning pages.
Yeah, morning pages.
Yeah.
What is that? Like I never heard of that.
So
before.
there's a book. I can't remember the name. Could be an African proverb.
Your mum got you into it.
Yeah, my mum did. Oh, The Artist's Way.
Yeah.
And it is essentially this guide that gets you doing activities, and one of them is morning pages. It's
if
pretty
you don't
common.
have a fucking job, what else are you going to do, right?
Yeah, exactly. No, but what I found was like going to this cafe and creating this ritual of writing out what was going on in my head. No job, need a job, no money, got a girlfriend, she's keeping me afloat. No, legit. It's like I started just doing a stream of conscious onto paper, and I'm sitting there, and this dude comes up to me. Tommy, it was a guy I went to high school with. He was a year above. And he said, "What are you doing?" It's not much. And I had nothing going on. And he said, "What's your skills?" And I said, "Oh, I make videos," and they were only for myself then. And he said, "All right, here's my card. I'll give me your number, and I might be in contact." And he was the CEO of this business, and he sent me a message later that day. Said, "Call this guy. He might have a job for you." So I called him, and we had a chat, and I went in and saw him, and they wanted a video made, and I said, "Yeah, of course I can." And I hadn't done client work as such like this, where it was, going to capture an event, tell a story of this thing that they had going on. And so I did it. And I shot it all in 50 frames by mistake. And I'm lucky I did, because I could slow it down. So it was slow-mo. So it was just like this trip into doing this thing, which I knew I could, but it was flexing a different muscle. And I gave it a good crack, and I thought, okay, I could probably do this. This could be a job, outside of creating my own content.
Yeah, I think there is the imposter syndrome very early on, and you actually probably
sometimes you are the imposter.
yeah.
You just coming in
100%, and you have to do that though in order to get through it, and then get to a point where you actually learn your skills. So there's gonna be a lot of times where you're shooting 50 frames. We don't have 50 frames.
Yeah, so
here. 60 frames. But you're going to screw up so many times. You're going to have the color correction off when you shoot
there was that too.
Yeah, didn't even get started on all the mistakes. But then eventually, and then I think this kind of goes to what you're saying with Katy Perry, is that you kind of forget that. And sometimes the early feelings of just starting out stick with you and hold you back from potentially doing bigger projects.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think the imposter syndrome can work for you in a huge way. I think that you need a bit of that, but that's the quality within Tommy that I love, which is just like, let's have a crack. And so that's how we ended up starting to work together. TJ actually said to me, he before we were even really close and had connected properly, we'd worked at the same place. We'd made a video. It just so happened he presented, there's like O Week in universities, which is sort of like the first week of college, where they have like all this, how do you even describe it?
It's like, what are you going to do? They show the courses, and you can meet people, and it's a time to get drunk, really.
And so Tommy and I ended up connecting, because we ended up the first video we ever did together was 10 years ago. It was 2008. And it was Tommy being a presenter, just like, "Hey guys, we're in Monash for O Week. Let's go chat to some people." And I'm doing like the crazy moves, so we can edit all together. And so that was the background we'd had together. And it just so happened that within the radio industry, Tommy had been on air, had done that in sort of a regional town, and I'd been doing the digital content for a national drive show. And so we'd sort of been connected on Facebook, and Tommy contacted me one day and said, "Hey, can we catch up? I'd love to chat." I don't know if you said you wouldn't have said pick your brains.
Yeah,
picking your brain is the number one thing that I can't stand.
I remember you told that to me when we met in Melbourne. You were like, "If there's one thing I hate in this world."
Yeah. Well, I think it's because there's something so it feels like there's a vulture that's like scraping, like it feels like a transaction, which I don't necessarily like.
Well, the value's more in their favour. They're getting more out of picking someone's brain.
It's actually, when you mention that to me, and it may be that, or maybe just the fact that more people have done it to me, I have noticed it more. And I have, you want to pick my brain? Yeah. It's like, it's going to be a consulting fee. You know what I mean? If you, there's one thing mentoring and helping people, but you can't do it for everybody. And if somebody simply wants to pick your brain, they're not adding any value.
But it's not only that, I actually think the language in picking your brain is sort of like, it feels like it's not giving what you have to say enough sort of clout. Like, I think picking the brain is, it's like my brain is like precious. Stop fucking picking at it. Like, it's something about that. But anyway,
well, it's not leading with value. I've got a work experience dude who helps me out on a lot of stuff, and he's awesome. And his email to me was like talking about stuff I'd done, giving me a few ideas, which I didn't use. But it was the value that he was offering up front versus a guy who just recently emailed me and just said, "I'm in this space. I'd love to do this. I'd love to catch up with you." But it's like, he hasn't taken time to even... Does he know my last name? I don't know, maybe.
Well, people who pick brains, pick your brain and leave. And I think that's part of it too, is it's like I actually want to connect with people and have longer term, relationships, whether that's friendships or workmates. And so Tommy reached out and we caught up. And
it's going to be really embarrassing if we look back and I said, "Can I pick your brain?" We should do it.
You know what? I want to just do one quick defense of the brain pickers.
Okay, great.
I think that for them, a lot of times it's just a soft, almost like it's like a fun way to say, like, I'd love to have a chat. And some people, I think, many of them are probably innocent, and they're just looking up to somebody they admire.
Well, we've already done, like, I think we've probably all done it, and I think it's over a long period of time that you start to pick up on those things. But I think it's reframing that sort of stuff. Like, I'm sure it took me thinking about it or someone having a conversation about picking a brain before I came around to it. But it becomes a bit of a tell. Like when someone says it, I straight away think, okay, they go along this like choose your own adventure. I'm like, okay, so the likelihood that this is going to lead to something, But you're right. I think it's a language thing.
Well, picking your brain is the equivalent now of when someone adds you on LinkedIn, you send them back an automated, great, let's connect.
Yeah.
Love, like those automated messages that you can flick off.
Yeah.
So maybe just get a bit more creative.
Yeah, a bit more personal. Like I think about, I did a bunch of work on search engine optimization for my business, and so when you would type in video production company when you're in Melbourne, it was like the top search result. And the interesting thing is you all of a sudden get a lot more emails and you get a lot of people asking for jobs, and I was able to work out what made a good application and ones that didn't. And the bad applications were to whom it may concern, if they say that, or it's like to the Full Stack Films team. I mean, there's fucking one of me. Or it's like it's the impersonal block of text which goes into what they're wanting to do, versus there's been a couple of times where I have connected with people and it's because like they'll say, hey, I listened to your podcast 5 years ago, and because of this little bit here, I actually went on and did this thing, and I would love to, and it's like a bit of a stroking of the ego and all that sort of shit. But that's like, I think that's like, there's a respect to that as well.
Yeah, I think it's you're proving that you put in the time and you didn't just copy and paste an email. It's like you're calling out something that somebody would have had to at least spend an hour listening to a podcast in order to get that, but likely they probably put in even more.
Yeah.
But then it's probably them being able to explain what their value could be to you, how they could help, whether it's working for free. Tommy, I know you sent an email to somebody that you really admired in in the self-development type world, which is was it Harper?
Yeah, Craig Harper.
Craig Harper. Yeah. Do you want to tell that story? Because like that was, you said, an email that you almost didn't send, and not very likely that it would have worked, but it did.
Yeah, and Craig Harper is someone I have looked up to since I was young. I used to be a personal trainer in another life, and he is the master. He's the Mr. Splinter of the personal training industry in Australia. Started like the first business that was selling personal training in Australia, if not the world at the time. This is years ago. And so I had an interaction with him when I was younger, where I was a young punk that called him, got his number and said, can I have a job? Which didn't go down well, but he gave me experience. He gave me some time on the floor, on the gym floor. But years later...
Time on the floor. What the fuck does
he
that
choked
mean?
me out. And I was... No, but years later, I had been watching Craig's stuff evolve online, and he loves to swear, and he's got some really just great messages that are very straightforward and resonate with a lot of people. But I saw his stuff, and I had started my production company early days, and I thought, I love what he's doing. I am a big fan of what he does, and I'm going to write him an email. Or it was a Facebook message actually, and I just basically led with, hey mate, I love your stuff. Been a big fan for a long time. I've just started my production company. I would love to help you out. No money exchanged. I just think what you're doing is great. And I just nearly didn't send it. I was sitting at a cafe and I was just about to not do it, and I just did it. And I just forgot about it. And a second later, so I didn't forget about it for that long, he messages me back and says, wow, I'm sitting here at my computer thinking, who could I get in my network to help me out with this stuff? What's your number? And so we were on the phone a few minutes later, and we've been working together for a long time. He's become one of my really close mates. And so if it wasn't for me sending that email, he wouldn't have come to my wedding. We wouldn't have created a whole bunch of great videos together and told lots of stories. And, you know, it did change a lot for me sending that one email. But I didn't say, can I pick your brain?
Right. I mean, if you pick your brain, there's nothing.
Yeah.
If you said, can I pick your brain? He wouldn't call you back. He wouldn't pick it up. But you offered, say, hey, can I do work for you for free? And that made the difference.
It's a public service announcement. It's not the answer is not to not send. The answer is still send emails, but it's about thinking about the recipient. What do they care about? Even to mention Seth again, like I asked him, I said, what made you say yes to doing our podcast? And the funny thing is that most of the emails that he receives are people saying, I love what you do and really nice stuff. But he says, I always have to discount it because the next paragraph is normally them asking for something. And so, you know, with him, it is leading with that, showing like this is the value that you've brought. But then it's it's a status game too. It's realizing like where you fit in the whole thing. And I think whenever I'm approaching anyone, it's like I'm low status. Like I'm asking something of you, and so I think in return I need to show value. And as I say it, I also realize that it's not all transactional. It can't all be like I'll do this for you and then you do this and all that sort of thing.
Well, that's what I went in with it. With Craig, I didn't want anything from him. I wanted to help him and bring value to him. So I think, that's definitely why that paid off. And that's why we had Seth on the podcast, because Josh had been emailing him, not asking him anything.
I don't think it hurts to send the email. So I don't think that's the advice we're giving.
Yeah.
It's send the email, but be very thoughtful about it and take the time with it. Don't email 100 people the same thing.
Yeah.
Pick 5 to 10 people that really inspire you, that you want to help and collaborate with, and then let them know how much value you can add. Make it easy for that person too.
Yeah.
Because if somebody reaches out to me and it feels like they want to help me out on my podcast, or they want to help out with a shoot, they're not making it easy in terms of how they might be able to. You have to make it clear of how like easy they are, how good they are at communicating, how quick they are, how much they can help. And I think that's a big step.
And it's also realizing what they care about and the being self-aware enough. So with the Seth Godin one, I said, we're not going to be there to pitch you anything. We're not going to bring an entourage. We're not going to have our mates there. Like selling it in like that, like actually pointing out those things, like front-footing the shit that they're probably thinking about. I think we were in his office. We'd never met him before. We're in his office space. And so like that's a big jump for a lot of people. And so selling that in and actually front-footing it, I think, is also good as well.
Seth Godin is one of those people where we don't have to explain who he is, right?
Yeah.
Because I think I don't think there's people like my girlfriend or my fiance listening to the podcast who doesn't know who he is.
Yeah.
But for those that don't know, he is an author, best-selling author.
18 best-selling books.
18 best-selling books.
35 languages it was translated into.
The coolest thing, dude, he gave you guys one of his books that's unpublished.
Yeah.
Well, it should be 19 best-selling books because he hasn't actually released it for sale.
Well, I reckon he's got that many little things he's made over the years for these different things you would never know about. But yeah, at the end of the meeting, he gave us a book and he said, this isn't, I don't sell this. This is just a book that I like to give out to people that I care about. And he gave us a copy. And it's just like, I think that's the other thing too, is like we had really low expectations. And when you have low expectations, what it means is you're giving the person a chance to be generous and for you to actually take that. I remember,
I was just going to say, he gave my son a book.
Oh, wow.
And he said, this is for Bodhi, and the book's called V is for Vulnerable.
As like a kid's book. And and I know that when I started doing podcasting years ago on my own, I flew to New Zealand specifically for an interview, and I had all these ideas in my head of what it was going to be like. And I thought, man, I'm going all of this way. And so you build a narrative in your head that they're going to really like care the fact that you've gone this way. And it's realizing that people don't care about that. Like people actually like it's playing in the world of nobody gives a fuck and everybody gives a fuck. I think if you play in that world, then you realize that you can be a little bit more intentional with what you're saying, because when you're writing, you're thinking about there's going to be a lot of people who don't care about my story. And when you are coming from that place, then you can start to say, well, what do they care about? And I think that that's like a healthy way to approach things. And so within that case, it's like he didn't care. He thought that I was from New Zealand. When I arrived to, like, I'm from Australia and I arrived to New Zealand, he's saying, man, like Auckland's beautiful, like thinking that I lived there. And it was that realization that like I actually got what I needed out of all of that stuff. And it's like everyone else is going through their day and he's not on the plane ride with me. He's not there when I'm spending $500 on tickets and all that sort of thing. And you don't need to sell that in. That's like part of the sacrifice that you make as an individual.
He might not even want you to do that. Yeah. I would feel incredibly guilty if somebody, paid for a flight to come interview me. I would feel terrible. Yeah. I'd be like, I'm not worth it. like $500, like save your money.
Well, we weren't planning on going to New York. I emailed Seth and said, hey, we're going to be in New York on these dates. Yeah. Hadn't booked any flights, right?
But we can be in New York. It was just a slight...
Yeah, so we said like... And the thing is that we never said at once the reason we are here, Seth, is because we have this interview. It's the only way. And
it's the same with you, Matt. We weren't going to be in LA.
We're going to be in LA. Yeah. We're here now.
Yeah, and that's it.
Yeah, but I think that's a really good filter to work on, is that most people don't care.
And I think, talking about Seth Godin and the power of consistency, he's one of those people that proves that, not only just writing books consistently, but he writes, does he still write a blog post every single day? Yeah. He writes an essay 5 days a week.
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah. That's creativity, right? Finding new positions on things and perspectives. I mean, in April this year, I read a blog post by him, and it was around, he was out of ideas. And I was so inspired by it, right? Because I was like, here we have Seth Godin, who has been writing for years and years and years and years, and he's finally come out and said it. And he's run dry. Turns out it was April 1st. It was April Fool's Day. But he actually said on our podcast he had over 50 people use that example, thinking it was like a positive thing, and that he really was out of...
He's like, nah, I got ideas. Are you kidding me?
I'm poking you.
He actually said, though, that it said more about the person emailing him saying, oh, Seth, here's some ideas. You ran out.
They said that?
Yeah, he got emails.
That's funny.
Crazy.
Man, I don't know. Is that a struggle for you guys in terms of the podcast? Because you're doing a podcast every day. I definitely heard you guys talking about on one of them where you were saying you hope that you got a bad haircut, so then it'd be something interesting and funny to talk about on the show. Yeah. How true is that? And how hard is it to maintain long form content like that?
I think the weird thing is some days we've got no ideas, and it's the time that we actually have the best banter.
Tommy can never have a bad haircut, by the way, just by design. His hair actually just flicks into place. If they shave a bit, it just pops back.
Do you even get a haircut, or it just stays like that?
Woke up like this.
Yeah. It's Mr. Lego Man. It's amazing.
No, but and then I think sometimes when we have too many ideas on the table, we can get a bit thrown off. There's too much going on. And some days we have a bunch of ideas and we don't even go there. Yeah. We just talk about completely random stuff.
It's the ultimate paradox. It's realizing that just like no one cares and everyone cares, it's the same tension of plan everything and plan nothing. And with the podcast, we have a Trello board, which I don't know if you've ever used Trello before. We put down a list of everything that we sort of want to talk about. If we have an idea, we chuck it in the Trello board. And it's about testing all of these things and what works. And I think that when those work is sometimes the process just gives you the confidence to not have to worry about it. So it's actually writing it down, a plan of the episode, and then chucking it away.
I think about having nerves going into an interview, and it's like in the early days when I didn't know I could actually do it, the nerves had more impact on me. I still have the nerves, but I have the understanding and validation because I've done it so many times That it's like, it's okay, I've got this. And so that's the process, showing up, Josh and I, doing it, we've done it enough, we know that we're going to do something, and some days are better than others.
Yeah, it's like going to give a talk, public speaking. You're always in some little way going to get a little bit nervous or a little bit anxious before you go out on stage. So it's almost just the confidence in being okay with those nerves and jitters. And sometimes, like you said, it's hard to even know what would make a good outcome, a good performance, because it's
like different things.
Some people like different things.
Yeah.
Somebody's gonna. Sometimes I'm surprised when somebody says, "Oh my God, that episode is my favorite episode that I've ever listened to," and it's like, "Oh, I wouldn't have picked that one for myself."
Yeah.
But it's because we're different people bringing in our different experiences to it.
Our experience is not what someone else is experiencing on the podcast, especially. I've noticed that.
Even like I think collaborating and being partners in a business, it's the other realization is that we all think differently. And when you come from that place, I think it can recontextualize things that would normally be tension points, and then it sort of goes away, because like actually the dots that I'm joining, the experiences that I'm pulling from are completely different to the other person.
I think that also, in terms of, you're talking about being consistent and then coming up with ideas, it does take focus in terms of, this is probably something you guys think about all the time. Yeah. Where you're just going throughout the day and you're like, oh, that would be funny to talk about.
All for content, we say, which is like a bit of a half a joke. It's basically a joke. It's because I got allforcontent.com. But it is
Did you?
Yeah, it's up for sale.
There it is. $50,000.
Yeah.
No, but it is the we're constantly now in a place, and Tommy's been doing it for Tommy's radio background.
Yeah, so I hosted a breakfast radio show. It was like 5 days a week, 3 hours a day. And you had to come with something because people relied on you having some perspective or observation. So half the stuff ends up being observations and seeing what people they're seeing but they're not talking about. And it's what I do for my own video content on my YouTube channel. It's like I just see stuff that stimulates me. But I know that the years of doing that has made it so much easier, but also painful because everything is content.
Right. But you kind of start to break down the walls, I think, in terms of having those creative blocks and not necessarily waiting for inspiration, but just sitting down and doing the work and making it happen.
And when you're doing it daily as well, you know, use the public speaking example. I think the reason that these things are scary is it's because this is my one chance. And when the stakes are high, it's a lot harder not to fuck up. And so what I try and do is, it's like in every moment of my life, even if the stakes are high, how do we lower them? And so from a production point of view, if we're working with a client, that means not having a crazy amount of crew, a crazy amount of lights. It's about not saying action and trying to heighten it. Because the thing is that when you're charging $20,000 for a project, there is the feeling that we need to show the production. And we need to elevate the stakes because there's a lot of money at stake. But it takes removing your ego to say, let's lower the stakes. This is easy. We can record for an hour if we have to. It really doesn't matter. We can edit this sort of stuff. All of that sort of language. And that extends to what we do with the podcast, where it's like, you know, even though the Seth episode was really great, that is one day of all of the episodes we do for a year. And there's nothing that we can do to even, you know, my girlfriend Bree's like, well, what are you going to do with the Seth episode? What can we do with the Seth episode? And there's not really much that you can do. It is one part of the journey. And when you're doing it every day, it lowers the stakes, which means it's a lot easier to succeed.
When I had Rich Roll on the podcast, I remember hyping it up to be this big thing in my own head.
Action.
Let's do this, Rich.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's make some money. And then, but for me, it was, I remember talking about it leading up to, I didn't know who Rich was 3 months before that interview. Yeah. I just met him at one of Josh and Ryan's events, and it was, I kind of was like, oh, this is, you know, he's got a big audience. This is going to be really helpful for me in terms of getting my word out there for my own podcast, because at the time I was getting maybe a couple thousand downloads a month. And the podcast didn't go the way I'd hoped. Rich was brilliant. He was an amazing, great interview, very gracious. I wasn't myself because I had built it up in my head to be this big thing, that this was my big opportunity, that one time I could go on stage and just crush it.
I think you're tricking yourself if you're elevating it too much. I think that we do that a lot. It's even like at the beginning of the podcast, when you were joking around with the language thing in our what you
now I can't edit that out.
Yeah, exactly. No, what you unintentionally did was you actually elevated the stakes, even though it was a joke. But as soon as you were able to say, "Guys, I'm just fucking with you," you bring it back down. And so I think that like it's finding the hacks. Like Tommy and I when we've had days where it's not easy. And, we're at different parts of the world. And now we're, back together because we're doing our business and we'll be spending all of our time in Melbourne, or a lot of it anyway. But we would actually say before we started recording, like, what do we want out of this? And it's like, we're two mates having fun and we're celebrating each other. And when you say that, even like vocalizing it, I think changes the stakes. And it reduces it from being this thing that like this tension to this like opportunity to just chill out.
Yeah, imagine if you said that every podcast would have to get better than the one before. Well, that would be a lot of pressure, wouldn't it?
I feel like you'd end up like it would create some sort of personality disorder where you just like, well, if you like that sort of idea is just like, where does it end? It ends in your mind exploding.
Yeah. Right. Well, like how high can you go before everything just falls apart?
Yeah.
And then like what? Then if you don't meet your expectations, then you're depressed.
Yeah. I think I am cynical to, just like perfection. The reason, some of the things that Seth Godin talks about, minimum viable audience, which is what is the minimum amount of people that you need to run a successful podcast or to have a successful YouTube channel. Kevin Kelly, who created Wired magazine, talks about the 1,000 true fans. And so it's like, you don't need to have a huge mainstream audience. You don't need to be crushing it with, thousands and thousands of people. You actually just need to serve a much smaller community. And I think that in turn that lowers the stakes and it gives focus, and it means that you're not worried about everyone else.
I think the goal does in a lot of ways influence and change our decisions and how we show up. Because if your goal is simply metrics, and it's one thing to celebrate metrics, it's another to say, I won't be happy until I get 1 million downloads or 1 million subscribers or whatever. How does that like influence the way that you guys make podcasts?
That's dangerous thinking about just metrics. I think I said to Seth, this is the first time that I've actually felt inside that it's okay just to show up and our goal is doing this thing, and each day we'll get better. And that, like, it's so easy to say that to someone that doesn't think that, and for them to then think, oh yeah, I could think that, but then not think it. It's not going to work for them. So it's like, I feel like I'm at a point where I've done so many things and thought about numbers and thought, I'd love to have a massive following, but it hasn't worked. So now with what Josh and I are doing, that constant showing up is the goal.
It's literally like when we started, I was like, okay, I've worked out that we gain, this is really exciting numbers for everyone, 1.7 new listeners every single day. Like when you did all the, I'm not good with maths.
Yeah, cut their legs off.
Exactly.
Cut their,
And so it was like, okay, so if we do 1,000 episodes, if we just still from day one where we're growing, we weren't telling anyone at the beginning. The first 20 episodes, we didn't talk about it. It was just sitting on iTunes, and we're just like,
since deleted.
No. Did anybody download it? Even though
we had
That's so interesting, isn't it?
We had like 20 to 30 downloads on those first ones, and now people have gone back to that back catalogue. But it gave us this confidence to be able to test and learn. I think like why would you want everyone watching you when you're getting started? Like like our thing is that if it takes us 1,000 episodes before we actually have 10,000 people an episode listening to us, then that means that they're getting at us at a completely different stage. And if we were to have secured certain guests on day one, we would have had no idea about ourselves.
I think also going back to what we were talking about earlier is the reward from the actual doing part sort of distracts you from thinking about those numbers. Yeah. And so we are getting more out of it than what the numbers would even give us.
Yeah, I think for me, there is a number that's important, and it's not a literal number, but more of an idea. Can I make a living? Because it's important. I mean, if it was $10,000 a year is not my number. It's higher than that, but it's less than 100,000. Yeah. And there's a point in there where fully satisfied, fully content. It actually took me as I was growing my freelance business, I started making more and more money. I made 6 figures for the first time. And then there was one year where I backslid and I made $15,000 less than I did the year before. And I was totally okay with that. It didn't hurt my ego at all because I had long before decided that if I could make $60,000, $70,000 a year and still keep doing this, that's the dream. Like it doesn't matter to me.
I think we're really lucky because with what we do with video production and having clients, it means that we don't need to monetize the Daily Talk Show. Mm-hmm. And so I feel for people who it's like their only thing is their podcast or, and that's the only way they're going to be able to make money, especially when it's their first rodeo. If this is the first thing you're doing and you're trying to make coin, I think that it's like setting up a Patreon page day one without an audience and think that like you're going to be able to make money. So that's a privilege that we have, which is being able to make all of our money through videos and clients. And the other thing too is like when we post about some of the episodes that we do, LinkedIn blows up and we have people reaching out to us. We have people who 3 years ago were saying that we're too expensive, sliding into our DMs and being like, oh, hey guys, what's like? And so we see the benefit of the podcast as a marketing and a branding exercise.
And I think about when you cloud it with money, will it change the creativity? How are you finding it with, turning this into money?
Yeah, well, I could say with minimal...
Turning this into money.
yeah. Trying.
No, guys, that was an African proverb.
In terms of the podcast and monetizing this, I don't feel a significant pressure. I think Patreon has done pretty well so far. I've got about 300. Actually, at the time we release this, fingers crossed there'll be like 400. But
by the time it's Christmas, only
by the
like
time,
40 odd days.
Can't wait for Christmas in 2 weeks. Yeah. 45 days. But we'll see exactly when. For me right now, the podcast doesn't make any money straightforward. Although if I do mention it at the beginning, I think that the tough thing is that I have found that I have to pitch Patreon at the beginning of the podcast. I did an experiment where I did 5 episodes where I did not mention it in the very beginning.
Man.
And I said, hey guys, if you want to learn about how to support this show, stick around after the podcast. And I would see 0, maybe 1 or 2 people signing up for Patreon after the episodes would release. And if I do it in the beginning, I'll get 10, maybe 15.
I can't believe how much, like pushing, say, iTunes reviews, the difference between pushing and not pushing. So at the beginning, we definitely were like, oh, we want to see some activity on our iTunes.
We need to know that someone's listening.
we want to have some ratings and reviews and all that sort of thing. And so at the beginning, we did say, hey, review the Daily Talk Show, give us 5 stars if you like it. And then it got to a point where it's like, it felt like diminishing returns, where it's like, okay, do we need to be in the top charts to be successful in this? And the interesting thing is, as soon as we stopped mentioning it, we get none. Like we actually, it has dropped off so much. But before, we would get, a couple a week or whatever it is. And so there is an interesting balance there around, even though the hard sell makes me uncomfortable, the hard sell is designed for a reason. It's because it's actually communicating what you want.
Yeah. And if you look at our businesses before we've come together now, we were very much just attracting video production work, which was very wide. And it's because we were casting that net really wide, which our new company, we're very intentional about what we want to create and the clients that we want to work with. Because if we got a whole bunch of people just by casting that wide, if we actually narrow it down, we should at least get the people that we want to work with.
Yeah, it's not a hard sell. It's just communicating well, right?
Yeah.
What so if thedailytalkshow.com is where you find our podcast.
Yeah.
Subscribe to Matt's Patreon.
Yeah. Just it has to be very subtle.
Yeah.
It's almost not in your face where you're clearly.
Did I eyeball it too much?
Yeah, no, it's okay. Well, you need to actually let people know that are listening.
I looked at the camera when I said thedailytalkshow.com.
And
right now speak over the cell.
Yeah, and now he's looking into the microphone as he delivers that. I don't think it works like that.
Has that been a challenge doing visuals and audio? Do you feel like you need to explain what's going on to the audio.
Sometimes we did the Mango Street podcast episode, and
they were dressed up in mango costumes. Right?
Yeah, and it was just really confusing for everybody. But there's these like little clips on Manfrotto tripods that actually are a screw, but I had no idea what they were, and I'm like, why do they come with these damn like little clamps that seem to serve no purpose?
Like cable holders or something?
No, it actually it looks like it would be a cable holder, but it's actually a screw for these, as they loosen up. Yeah, it's actually really smart. And unfortunately, on that episode, I threw it out.
Oh no!
But I still have like one or two because I have a bunch of tripods. But that's like a visual component that I sometimes will call out. But it's like, I think most people are forgiving, especially if it's just something that's like, okay,
Absolutely.
I guess I missed that, but that's okay. And then, but my audience is kind of split between people who listen and people who watch. But it's you guys did a couple videos.
Yeah,
I mean, you got Paul Jarvis on.
Chase Jarvis.
I thought it was Paul. I actually did that on purpose.
That was a good neg.
No, but
it's a really good neg when you get the name right.
There is actually a Paul Jarvis, though. He's a writer.
Yeah, Paul Jarvis. Is he like a tech commentator maybe?
He's got a newsletter. He does MailChimp courses.
Yes.
Yeah, we had Chase on the show very randomly. But I think it's almost a bit of a belief of our podcast and our approach is putting ourselves out there. We were in New York City and we decided to do an episode where we're going to record it with a GoPro outside in front of the Flatiron building in New York City. And so we were walking there. We almost didn't do it. I started losing my voice. I wanted to go home. I was being soft. And we did it.
He said it.
And we rocked up. We rocked up. And where we were going to do this episode, Josh sees this guy with his headphones on.
I'm like, I think that's Chase Jarvis. And I'm a little bit more introverted in those moments. But Tommy gets in his face, like trying to get in front of him, just like
make eye contact.
Chase Jarvis.
I went up to and I said, Chase, just trying to first name basis, see if he just reacts to it. Had headphones on, so
had more cut through than Paul.
And so I said,
Paul, can I pick your brain, Paul?
So he took them off. He's like, oh wow, and so we ended up getting him onto that episode of the Daily Talk Show, and he gave us 10, 15 minutes of his time. He was busy, but he just, I think, loved the fact that we were hustling and just asked him.
Yeah, we could be doing a lot more video than what we are. Like the reality is, like, that is our bread and butter. That's that's what we do, and we get paid to do it. And I think that it's the way that we're looking at this is minimum viable product, which is a tech terminology of like iterating on things. So like what is it that we need to do now? Because if we were doing video to start with,
be 3 episodes.
Well, we wouldn't have continued, because we would have said, well, Josh, you're going to be away. Can you sort out, like, it's just the barrier to entry was way too high. The stakes were way too high. So we're going to eventually be doing video. And the awesome thing is that there's people who've been listening to the Daily Talk Show from the start, and you can hear their excitement in the messages we receive, because they've seen when we were at the very beginning and we had no idea, and we were just like talking shit. And
saying the C-bomb.
Yeah, dropping the C-bomb, doing all that sort of stuff. And they've been able to see the journey. And I think that that's what I love about even what you're doing. It's like you're sharing the journey, and that's like, it's such a big part of the process. And it's, I think, what is going to keep an audience for a longer period of time.
Yeah, I think that's it. It's because a lot of times you try to employ the fake it till you make it approach. But I think that can work with client work, because you don't want to really show your doubts and your concerns to a client. A client wants to hire you because they know that you're going to be able to deliver. It's like when I was living at home and doing client work, and clients would say, hey, can we come to your studio and watch you as you edit? And I was like, I got to see if my mom is okay with that. Let me ask for permission first.
I've got to make my bed.
I'm going to speak to the CEO.
My investor. And it's like, but it was really a dark cloud over me, because it was always that fear of getting found out. And it was the imposter syndrome. It's like,
it's saying we on your website when there's fucking one of you.
And I think that there's a balance there where, like, maybe you could say we if you hire freelancers and you collaborate with people all the time, but at the same time, you don't have to go that far. You could just make it be known that you're an individual. And I would actually never lie to clients. If they say, oh, so is it just you? And I was like, yeah, it's just me. But then I hire and bring on freelancers from time to time.
I think it's the blurred line between being a freelancer and wanting to be an entrepreneur and creating this big company. Because I think for me, many times I've had the we, and it's just been me and some other people that have been helping me out. But if I doubled down on it being me, I probably would have done better. And that's what I love about, we can now say we. That's basically why we started our company.
Our new business is
Clever.
called Big Media Company. BigMediaCompany.com.
Check it out.
He looked at the camera.
And now he's looking at the mic.
And it's that idea, like it is a bit tongue in cheek. It is this idea of, two small businesses coming together
to create a big media company.
But I think that the fake it till you make it can be recontextualized to be something else, which our mate Peter Shepherd, who is this guy, Human Periscope, he's works with creatives and all that sort of thing in coaching, and he talks about changing it from fake it till you make it to, what about if you change it to as if? So what about if you had a podcast as if you had 100,000 listeners from day one? And that's not like bullshitting, that's not like faking it, but what it's doing is it's like giving it the energy to succeed. And I think that like we use that as if all the time. It's like, come to the US as if it makes financial sense for us. It does not make like we do not make money from the podcast. Us doing all of this is money out of our own pocket. But the thing is that we know that if we do it as if, we are more likely to actually start doing the things that we want to do, which I think a lot of people maybe don't. It takes them a long time to get there, to put that investment.
A lot of people online are faking it. And on Instagram and Twitter, they're making it seem like their lives are way better than they actually are. So then when if they actually make it, it's kind of a hollow feeling because you can't celebrate it. And there's also nothing for people to look back at to say, oh, that's when they started. For me, I love being able to look back at Joe Rogan and seeing his first podcast was just a live stream.
It was so shit.
Have you seen it? Yeah, it's just like jittering, and they're like, hey, can we put the clock on the screen? Let's get some snowflakes. And there's like snowflakes falling down in front of the camera. And it's amazing to be able to look back at that because I think that's really inspiring for people who are just getting started out. And like you guys said, it's like you knew from the beginning it didn't matter what the first 20 episodes look like if anybody listened to it at all. It was just put it out there, and then eventually down the road we can we'll have the courage to tell people that we started a podcast.
And it gave it more excitement because it's like, okay, we're actually legit. We've convinced ourselves now that we can do it, and we're going to keep doing it.
I think that we're lucky that we have the confidence to do shit that makes no sense. And if anything, if people take anything from this conversation, it's that confidence is free. Like you going out and starting the thing and doing the thing, that's like the bit that's going to make the difference, and that's what's actually going to make you better. It's not like you can theorize all you want. You can like be doing mind maps and saying like I'm going to have all these guests on and like, but until you actually do the first one, you're not going to know whether it's good or not. So it's like it's actually like doing the thing rather than thinking about the thing.
As in like you can create confidence, as in all it takes is just doing it consistently.
I think that it's a tricky one to come to terms with, but I think that sometimes we think and then we do, and so it's like, okay, when I feel inspired, I'm gonna then do a thing. But what about if you changed it to like acting as if you were inspired and doing the thing and then feeling that thing after it? So it's like, if you're not, rather than waiting for the confidence to be able to do a podcast, what happens if you build the confidence through doing the podcast? So realizing that episode 1, you're going to feel shit about it. You're going to think that it's like really dumb and no one's going to listen, and that's fine. And then you're going to build up that confidence.
Guys, any last words?
The daily...
I was gonna give you that.
No, well, the funny thing is, it's one of those. It's such a generic name.
I love it.
We're telling like an Uber driver. He's like, oh yeah, I'm going to listen to the dailypodcast.com.
It can go over people's heads, or it can have real cut through.
Yeah, I actually love the fact of how generic it is. But I also feel for you guys because I'm like, you could never. I mean, I guess you could change it.
SEO, well, Google, like if you type in the Daily Talk Show, we're number one.
It's kind of amazing.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Do a lot of people search it?
I do.
Guys, if people want to find your work, thedailytalkshow.com.
Exactly.
Freelance, bigmediacompany.com.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Big media company.
Easy.
Yeah. And then
Thanks,
we've both
man.
got YouTube channels.
Yeah. Building
YouTube.
that out. Just Josh.
I'm going to
Jansen.
link it.
Yeah, just do that.
Yeah.
Do you do many show notes or something?
I don't do show notes, but I do link it in the description of the podcast. So if you like kind of swipe over on your app, you could see the links to everything.
Can you
there.
just make sure you put the African proverbs in there?
I will. Actually, I probably will now.
Good,
now that you
good.
mentioned that.
Perfect. And you're going to be on our podcast now. So
Yeah.
that's nice.
Yeah. Let's do. Oh yeah. So people can go and listen to that as
Yeah,
well, which was
exactly.
released 3 months ago. We went back in time. Cool. Thanks for doing the show.
Thanks.
Thanks, mate.
Thanks for listening to The Ground Up Show. If you're getting some value from the podcast, you can support the show on Patreon. Every month, I create exclusive videos exploring lifestyle design, minimalism, creativity, and business. These vlogs and AMA podcast episodes, which can be found nowhere else, give a rarely seen look into my work and personal life. Help support the show for the cost of a cup of coffee a week and get access to all this content at patreon.com/Matt Diavella. Again, that's patreon.com/Matt Diavella. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next week.